Please. So good evening and welcome to the Guyra Chambers for the June 2018 meeting. Almighty God, we are meeting today to conduct matters of business. Please guide our hearts and minds in the spirit of fairness, right thought and speech. Impart your supreme wisdom upon our activities so that our affairs may reach a successful conclusion. Thank you for being our source of guidance today to the advancement and true welfare of our people and of Australia. Amen. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and pay our respects to elders past and present. The Armidale Regional Community pays tribute to their love of land, love of people and love of culture. We all share the beauty of this land, the richness of its soil and the uniqueness of its wildlife. Let us walk together in the footsteps of love and understanding. While valuing diversity, let us share the same hope for a better future. Now, this meeting has been audio and video recorded, and the recordings of the non-confidential parts of the meeting will be made available on the internet. No other persons are permitted to record the meeting unless specifically authorised by council to do so. Now, just a note on items on Have Your Say. All speakers are requested to ensure their comments are relevant to the particular agenda item. The chairperson may withdraw the privilege to speak where a speaker makes personal remarks or criticisms or uses abusive or inappropriate language. Speakers do not enjoy any special protection arising from comments made during council meetings and therefore should refrain from making defamatory remarks or personal defamatory statements against any individual. May I also ask you to turn your phones to silent or airplane mode, please. Thank you. So, there are no apologies. Any declaration or disclosure of interests, please?
Yes. I'd like to disclose for agenda item 8.1, non-pecuniary, non-significant conflict, as my spouse is employed by the New South Wales Police Force, and I will leave the meeting during that item.
Thank you, Councillor Gray. Any others? Okay, we'll move on to Have Your Say. We've got two speakers today, Mr. Chris Jordan and Professor Herman Beiersdorf. Chris, you're first. For both Have Your Says, it's 5 minutes. If you get to 4 minutes, I'll give you a little warning and then cut you off at 5 minutes. So come to the podium, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do need a timekeeper, otherwise I'll be here all day on this very important issue. I want to thank you, first of all, Council, for allowing this opportunity to speak. I want to thank Councillor O'Brien for a motion that will be pending in a short time. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll just pass this, I'll show you this. This is our new slogan for the Police Association New South Wales. It's called Back the Blue. So can I just basically tell you what the Police Association is? It's the union arm of the New South Wales Police Force. That's why I'm not in police uniform today. Every member of our union is an active serving member of the police force, everywhere from our president to our local branch official, and most of you know I'm a local police officer and I've been here now for 18 years in the Armidale area. But what keeps on popping up over the 18 years that I've been here is this issue on prisoner transportation and how it's affecting our community. What it is at the moment, police are being required, and each community has their own different stories. So ours is unique to our area. The police are required to transport prisoners to and from correctional centres. We're also required to convey mental health patients to be transported from this area to Tamworth most of the time. Sometimes we go even further, and that's for mental health assessments. But what it is, it's at the expense of the police in our community. So the best way I can express what's happening is just by stories. So, for example, Tenterfield, which is, of course, north of here, they have one of the horror stories of this campaign is that there were no police in that town for 6 hours. While the police there, the first line response police, were transporting prisoners to Lismore. They had some issues down there as well. Could have been longer. But in our local community here for Guyra, and I'm glad we're sitting here in Guyra because Guyra and Uralla are one of the most affected areas in our backyard for the Armidale Regional Council area. They are always the first to be called upon when we have to be transporting prisoners. They have to transport to Tamworth. So from here, go to Armidale, pick up the prisoner, to Tamworth, then back again. It leaves no police in this community. The only police that can respond to this community is from Armidale. So as you know, you've got 2 lots of roadworks we're going through there. If there's an incident or an emergency here, it's way too long. Way too long. The other issue that we've been seeing in more recent times is that Tamworth Jail's been full, so we're having to drive to the coast. So our first response police are now driving to Kempsey, and it's not through the back way, it's via Bellingen Highway down, or to Grafton Jails. That's the first response policing whose primary job is to keep community safe. Our issue with this campaign is that we're compromising community safety, and I can go on all day with just examples in just our community, let alone going elsewhere. So it's an issue that's temporarily been fixed up over the last 18 years that I've been part. So there have been handshake deals, kind of things being done, like what's happening now. So we're seeing more and more of our prisoner transports being done by juvenile justice and correctives, but it's only temporary. And when the squeaky wheel goes away, so to speak, we'll be back to where we were a couple of weeks ago, a couple of months ago. This is a lifetime opportunity for us to make real changes for now and for the future. And I'm asking for support, and that's what we're doing on behalf of the Police Association New South Wales. And we're asking for your support on that area, and that will be greatly appreciated. It's already started, and by asking for your support, it's getting to areas of government that we can't get to or won't be able to listen to. So I'm happy for questions, queries or comments, but in brief, that's what I have to present for you today to support the motion. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Chris. One question. So, Councillor Bailey.
A patient transfer, a prisoner or remand transfer occur over a month? Would it be once a day? Would it be 3 times a month?
Yeah, it all depends on the courts.
Realise that.
Now we've got a judge sitting here at Armidale. We're now doing court, where that doesn't happen anywhere in the state. So that depends on the court. So it could be we could have 3 prisoners in one day, and next week we'll have none. So it's all depending on what happens in the sentencing in the courts.
Thanks very much, Chris.
Thank you.
Dr. Meyersdorf.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councillors, for allowing me to speak today, and I'm glad to be up here in Guyra having a look around. Let me start on a very positive note. As I look around the walls, including what's temporarily hidden, we have portraits or pictures, call them what you like, of mayors and others. And in fact, that's something, this is an entirely new suggestion, just came to my mind now, something the Armidale Regional Council could consider. So rather than just having mayors, full stop, which is all we've got, I think, from what I'm talking about, why doesn't the Armidale Regional Council have, you know, the 11 councillors, including mayor, deputy mayor, general manager, etc. So I think we can always learn from our neighbours. So that's a very positive thing. I'm really glad to see the pictures are still up here. And by the way, the other day, you might have seen this in the paper, the mayor of Uralla was elected as chair of the what they call the JO, which is great. But if you look at the background, the picture in the paper and also on TV, hello, there's a rogues gallery there of the Moree mayors in the council chambers, in the foyer or somewhere. So it's certainly not something that we would want to lose sight of. So that's the positives. And by the way, I'm doing this on behalf of George Allingham, 1863, 1864, and 79 others. And also, I might add, not just Armidale or Armidale City, not just Armidale Demerrick, with which I've been associated, of course, but also Demerrick Shire. There's 3 different councils which had their portraits, the portraits of their mayors, and indeed Shire presidents hanging there. Well, ever since I joined council, they were there. And of course, every couple of years, another 1 or 2 portraits were added. So I really think it was a pity, and we've had this argument before, that they were just sort of removed, and I won't go into the background anymore, we know that. But with apparently no real plan to do anything about it except to keep them in storage. Now, earlier this year, some people actually, including the Armidale Regional Association, Ratepayers Association, started asking some questions, and then Councillors O'Connor and O'Brien actually put something, I think, to the April meeting, which has led to today's recommendation. In my view, and with due regard to the I was going to say the keeping place, but I meant, of course, the folk museum. With due regard to the folk museum, I don't think that's the most appropriate place, mainly because, as it says in the report, it would only be displayed on a rotational basis. 2 other small things. One small thing is that it has been said repeatedly that the collection has been digitalised. And that is in fact true, and it's a welcome addition or adjunct. It's good to have it digitalised, including the mayors of Guyra, if I recall correctly. So we do have that record. And the school kids wanting to do a fascinating research project, they've got it digitalised. Anyone who wants to look it up, including in cases where supplied brief biographies, great. I fully applaud that. The fact that the walls were painted, I fully applaud. But the fact that the pictures have been hidden, so almost on the dust heap of history, to quote Karl Marx, is, I think, a pity. So please consider putting them back in what I would consider to be their appropriate place, and where they are in other councils, including here. Well, this is not another council, but a previous council, and of course Moree and many other councils, to my knowledge, where the pictures of mayors and sometimes other senior officials or councillors hang. So please consider it. There is plenty of space. I didn't get around with a measuring rod or anything, but we actually had the 80-odd pictures hanging there. They weren't fighting or crowding each other. They were actually hanging there quite peacefully, certainly since I joined council in 1991, and it's been added to ever since, of course. And so please consider it. As I said, Historical Society is fine, but what you want to do, and most people that I know, if they come to pay their rates or want to see the mayor or the general manager, they just walk straight past it and they don't even look at it. Fair enough. But if you're waiting for the mayor, as sometimes happens, or waiting for the general manager, you say, who's this and who's that? And you go right to a long line of history. You don't have that in the digital version. You have a long line of history. So again, speaking, hopefully with their, I can't ask them for permission because most of them are dead. I'm trying to speak on behalf of 80 mayors, but above all, the history and the local history, of course, local government history, and the heritage of the 3 councils that I've mentioned. And also, just jumping forward, Armidale Regional Council might consider continuing this tradition, perhaps in a slightly different format. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Basdorf. So I particularly like the paintings hanging outside my office in the walkway myself. But right, moving on to item 6, the confirmation of minutes. There's 4 of them. There's the ordinary council meeting from 23rd of May, the closed session, and then the extraordinary meeting on the 1st of June and the closed session. So could I have a move and a seconder, please? Councillor Gray, Councillor O'Brien. Oh, I'm sorry, Murat. Any corrections to that? Okay, I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Unanimous. There is no mayoral minute, so I'll move on to item 8.1, which is the representation to the state government calling for an end to prisoner transfer. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor O'Brien, Councillor Murat. Councillor O'Brien.
Yes, I'd like to speak to the motion. I think this is an occasion when the local government, our local government, can fulfil their really important role of being on-the-ground witnesses for issues and problems in the local community, represent their community, and lobby and advocate further up to levels of government that make those decisions and allocate those resources. I think that's an important role. We can see in the community what those issues are. We can listen to, and thank you for Chris Jordan too, listen to how those affect the people in this town and lobby. I think that's a really important role we play. State governments often go campaign on law and order. Law and order issues are really important in state campaigns. I think, you know, on this issue, obviously they haven't put their money where their mouth is and have left the community a little vulnerable. As you can see, quite vulnerable at times when there are just not a police available. This issue has a number of ramifications for our community. I think obviously one is safety. I mean, do the community actually realise that quite often we do not have the full contingent of officers in our region? And anyone who has to call a police for a crime call out and have to wait maybe for hours to get a policeman to come, will often blame the police for that. And in fact, people need to rely on police, and that kind of breach of trust or that sense of distrust when they don't know the real reason why the police aren't available has an eroding impact on the relationship between the police and the community. And we're often down also, not just down police, we're often down vehicle. So if there is a crime call out, what kind of safety issues is it for not only community but the police when they don't have proper transport vehicle to take the prisoner to the lockup? Also, having a look online at the kind of vehicle it is. Now that vehicle is meant to take prisoners or people who've been arrested from the town just to the lockup. It's, you know, it's meant to go just 60 kilometres per hour in a small couple of blocks or something. Instead, it's going hours and hours in what really is a box on a ute. So it's like a heated box in the summer and it's like an esky in the winter. And so really, it's only a matter of time when one of those prisoners actually don't make it. So it will end up being quite a serious risk to prisoners. So finally, it's police working conditions. The police are not doing the job they're meant to be doing. They're sitting in cars endlessly or waiting outside courts or waiting at mental health hospitals or other hospitals. That's not what they were trained to do. They were trained to be out doing not only protecting our community, but proactive policing. Some of them really have to come in on their days off too, and being, you know, it's difficult to say no when there may be a risk to the community. So that's a working condition too. So council must call on the state government and to properly fund the Department of Justice so that prisoner escorts are conducted by the proper place, the corrective services. This has been going on way too long. When lack of funding leaves our communities not safe, it really is important responsibility of council to speak up. So thank you.
Councillor Murat.
Yeah, I'd just like to agree with Councillor O'Brien, what she just stated there, and just raise the point that most of our smaller communities have very, very limited resources, and the resources we do have in those communities with regards to policing and public safety and being able to address emergency situations, we need to keep those police in those towns and in those communities. So I just support Councillor O'Brien.
Anyone who will speak for the motion? Batali?
Mr Mayor, very briefly, and thank you Mr Woodland for the email you sent us all this morning, which had a strong letter of support from Adam Marshall. This is a no-brainer. We'll adopt this unanimously, but I think that a lot of what was in his letter is grist for the mill in terms of our submission to government. So I'd encourage the staff to include a lot of what he said in his letter in our submission. Thank you.
Anyone who speak against the motion? Okay, I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you. Moving on to item 9.1, it's a six-part recommendation. You can see it in front of you. I have asked for an extra bit of paper to be put on your desk, and that is the draft. It's got draft all over it with blue. To clarify, that is for part D. So if you look at the landing fee concessions that are on the blue sheet, that is what we're referring to, and that was what was discussed at a workshop to clarify the issues. So just before we ask for movement, second, someone want clarification? Councillor?
I just wanted to check that this draft is actually a draft section, not locking in those fees.
This is draft up until we decide today, yes. Yeah. Okay, can I have a move? Okay.
My question is whether the landing fee concessions, which are a global amount per aircraft per year, right, so I've been asking this question. So here it states maximum of 5 aircraft. So the concession is for an exemption for the first nominated 5, and then these concessional rates for an additional 5 only. Is that correct?
No, it's, your microphone, please. No, this is the first 5 are exempted totally. Then from 5 to unlimited is at the $400 and $460 per aircraft per year.
Sorry, but it just says maximum of 5 aircraft where it talks about landing fee concessions.
That is exemption, yes. Okay, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Robertson, seconder. For the 6 parts, yes. So Councillor Robinson, you moved. Anyone seconding? Yep. Councillor Robinson?
Well, thank you. I mean, I think it's really unfortunate that Council has been working at extremely tight deadlines, and the plans have been, so we have to adopt these plans now, even though I've still got some concerns about them. And for example, I was concerned by some of the responses to the community comments. For example, the Save Our Council submission asks for costs for the 2 councils before amalgamation to be compared to the post-amalgamation period. And even if we can't provide this information now, I really hope we'll be able to do it at a later stage. Similarly, some of the community submissions were on the bicycle plan, and at the April meeting of the Environmental Sustainability Advisory Committee, Group Leader Service Delivery Mark Perofsky said that the Armadale-Dumaric bicycle strategy was one of the worst plans he'd ever seen. So updating it, I would hope, should be high on our priority list, especially given the recent research showing that those who didn't cycle for transport had 64% higher mortality than those who did, and that cyclists for transport had 46% lower risk of developing heart disease and a 45% risk of developing cancer. So I was quite pleased to see Sustainable Living Armadale's transport group saying that they were enthusiastic about working positively with ARC to develop an improved and updated strategy. And indeed that seems to be consistent with our operational plan, which says under E 4.4.5 that we'll update the Armadale bicycle strategy to identify... No, it's the whole lot. You can put an amendment in about the landing fees. So to identify potential future cycle routes and implement low-cost recommendations. So instead of just being rather dismissive, I would have liked to have seen Council try to explore what could have been done within our budget and within clause E.4.5 to satisfy and meet the needs of our community. And finally, I would also like to say that it would have been helpful when Council has access to searchable documents, as is clearly the case with these plans, that is the format in which they're provided to the community. It would make life easier and save time and effort for everybody who has to want to check particular items or charges. So I would like to see that, again, these, although we have to adopt them, these plans are considered works in progress, and that we will refine them as we go forward to ensure that they meet the best interests of our community.
Councillor Widders? Yep. I'll just let the discussion go on for the moment, thanks. You wish to speak for the motion?
No, against.
So, can I have someone for the motion? Councillor Tiley?
Mr Mayor, I'd like to commence by commending our staff for putting together this very comprehensive operational plan and budget under difficult circumstances. The first such set of papers for the new elected council. I commend them roundly. We've had several workshops, discussions, sought a lot of information before this went out on exhibition. I think the small scale response, when one considers the regional council population, would tend to indicate that the budget and operational plan is at least supported, unless there's a great deal of antipathy out there. I think together, it's a good document, it's supportable, and I am strongly supportive of the total recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor O'Connor?
Oh, thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I endorse what both Councillor Robinson has said and Councillor Tiley in relation to the hard work that's gone into this, and I'm very mindful of the deadlines we have, but I am very concerned about item D, which I'm informed is not severable, and that is in relation to the airport fees and charges. I've had conversations, it's not severable, I've had conversations as late as recently as this morning, and I think there's problems. What's happened, I think, is we've got a policy of the airport being turned, while still under construction, into a standalone business unit, and there's the suggestion that that requires cost recovery in relation to what in the global scale is a very small amount, less than or pretty much the same as a very ordinary consultant's fees. For the price of this is going to be massive disruption to our pioneer airport businesses, and some of whom are going to the trouble of actually digging deep into their pockets to buy land outright in fee simple to invest in our airport long term. They're very unhappy still about this draft version that we've been given today. I just would like to quickly run through the reasons in summary, and I support them in their concern. I believe that we talk and talk and talk and talk about economic development, but here we have a unique and highly valuable cluster of businesses that are offering something not quite unique in the state, but almost unique in the state, that are growing, and that nevertheless we're going to hammer them with operational difficulties that are going to, in one case at least, drift their business to another airport. And it's not their fault, it's just pure economics. And the problem is this, that there's uncertainty. This document brings uncertainty into their operations for what I see as a very minimal return to council, and a dreadful outcome for our ambitions for growing our economy, in particular the aviation cluster at the airport. The problem, as it's been explained to me in simple terms, is this: that it will import huge uncertainty, because the assumption underlying this 5 exempt aircraft is that these are a bunch of cars that these airport operators have, and they maintain the same fleet year on year. They do not. In fact, the way it happens is if they get a big contract, they search the marketplace for the right kind of plane or helicopter, excuse me, with which to hire, lease, buy, resell through the year according to the contract works that they have. It's a completely different kind of business to running a fleet of cars or any land-based business, really. So to ask them to select 5 discrete aircraft, identify them as the recipients of the exemption, and then another 5, as I understand this document to say, as the recipients of the annual concessional rate is not possible for them. And it imports 2 difficulties for them. One is that they can't pick, so they've got no way of knowing if they have more than 10 aircraft or more than 5, what their costs in terms of landing fees and liability to council is going to be. The second one is that when they go out to market to find the right aircraft for the job that they're tendering for or have contracted for, they can't find that aircraft easily because each different type of aircraft will incur a different kind of fee. Now, there's still uncertainty as to two operators out there are launching into pilot training, which is a huge advantage for our community, and yet both are still uncertain about the fees that they will have to pay. And in fact, one contract that they have in place for pilot training is in jeopardy because of this draft. If there was any way this could be severed from this motion, I ask someone on council staff to tell me now, because I just think this is a really unsafe way to go forward. We should be treasuring these aviation industries and clusters out at the airport. They've gone through a terrible time with the construction works, the sewer, other things. Anybody knows it's disruptive when you're building a new terminal, new aprons, and they've put up with their fair share of it. Why would we penalise them with business uncertainty at this time? I just cannot understand why we are contemplating imposing this on them. Let's give it a break for 12 months and have proper consultation with them. We can surely afford this out of our economic development budget. If we want to cost recover, let's give them a break for 1 more year so that we can sort out a proper way forward that's not going to damage this cradle of new growth, new industrial growth for Armidale. We're always saying...
Councillor O'Connor, time.
Oh, did I not get a warning?
There's no warning for councillors.
Well,
So, anyone wants to speak for the motion?
Mr Mayor, I've had discussions with various operators out there as chairman of the Regional Growth Committee, and I think we've got 2 challenges. Firstly, if we take this revenue out, we've got to find $35,000 elsewhere in the budget and put it back in, because we've got to become financially responsible, and you can't say it comes from economic development, because the airport is actually controlled and run by the business unit. It's not the economic development unit. It's run by Phil Perham's area, which is the business unit. But if we take $35,000 out of that, we've got to replace it. We've got to be financially responsible. Secondly, it is not as if it's an isolated situation. Most of the airports in the major regional airports in New South Wales have some kind of landing fee. So this attitude that there's 120 out there that don't have landing fees, well, there's probably good reasons for that. It's Walcott, it's probably the smaller airports, but we're investing large amounts of money in our airport, and I think the proposal that has come forward after the discussions, I think, is reasonably fair. You're always going to find a situation where some people are not happy, but I think at the same time we've got to be prepared to, if we want to make continued investment in our airport, we've got to find the revenue to do that. We are financially strapped as a council, and if we keep on giving money away, we won't be able to attack the parking problems out there, we won't be able to attack all the other issues that we've got out there to deal with, and that's why I would encourage that we pass these fees as is.
Councillor Gray, you wish to speak against the motion?
Yes, I would like to. I would also like to commend Councillor Tiley on his comments regarding the work that's been involved on behalf of the council staff. it is point D, again relating to the airport landing fees, that makes this motion to me untenable. I think we're in agreement that with Councillor O'Connor that there still seems to be more discussion that needs to happen around these. It is going to impact their many businesses. We do have the opportunity to create a centre of excellence in aviation at Armidale Airport, which I think needs to be considered. Yet also to make sure that we are, whatever fees are put forward, whether it's no fees or some fees, that we have agreement with the business owners for the majority. And I don't think that we have that yet. We were assured, I was assured that all business owners were happy with this draft, and it has come to my attention that not all are, and I don't expect all to be, but I think we need to have more than 50% happy with the fees and how they're implemented and how they impact the businesses, to ensure that we create certainty, particularly around whether these fees and charges are subject to change, which can, that discussion just needs to be had, I believe, with more of the business owners up at the airport. That's it. Thanks.
Councillors, I'd like to, it wasn't until I started reading this that I realised that what they've printed off is the incorrect version, because the correct version is 5 aircraft unlimited, 5 aircraft exempt, and from 5 above is a flat fee. What we've got here is a maximum of 5 aircraft per year above. So I'd like to defer Part D until the July meeting, but Part D. Oh, Part D on the aircraft landing fees. Yeah, I know. This is only the landing fees. If with the authority of the mover and seconder, are you happy with that?
Yes, I'll accept that.
Good, thank you. So
For the record, just so it's on the audit.
So what we're dealing with is the Part D, just to clarify with people, is that the fees and charges for the that are relating to the airport landing fees will be deferred to July meeting. And Pete?
Mr. Mayor, also you'd have to include a couple of additional words along the lines of that the current 2017-18 landing fees be applicable in 2018-19 until such time as they're reviewed.
Natalie, did you get that? So, but we are going to be dealing with Part D, the Guyra Hack program and Clora Aged Care Facility. They're still included in the discussion today. So, anyone wish to speak for the motion again? Okay, well, I'll hand it back to Councillor Robinson from right of reply.
Thank you. I think we've reached a fairly good compromise.
Okay, I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Passed. And Councillor O'Connor, I'm missing these name tags. I can't work out who I'm talking to. So moving on to item 9.2. Moved Councillor Tiley, seconded Councillor Gray. Councillor Tiley? Anyone speak for it? Against? I'll move that. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. item 9.3, which is the acquisition of a drain reserve, and it's a four-part. Could I have a mover for that? Councillor Murat, Councillor Gray, Councillor Murat.
No comment, it's just an operational matter.
Councillor Murat, your microphone, please. Anyone else speak for the motion, against the motion? I'll put it. Those in favour? Those against? Carried.
Excuse me, Mr Mayor, before you go into item 9.4, I've just realised that late item. I would also have a declaration of interest in that matter as well. So I will leave the room.
Yes. Thank you, Councillor Gray. Item 9.4 is in the supplementary papers. This is fee waiver for the Armidale Town Hall, request by the New England Police for the District Awards. Councillor Murat, Councillor Martin. Councillor Murat.
No comment, I just think it's a good thing we support the police on this matter.
Councillor Martin.
Yeah, no comment.
Anyone wish to speak for the motion? Against? Those in favour then? Those against? Carried. Now we're moving to item 11.1, and this is the public exhibition of the policy for solid fuel heating appliances, and it's in a four-part motion. So can I have a mover for that, please? Councillor Robinson. A seconder? Sorry, Councillor Gillespie, you had your hand up. Sorry, can I have a seconder for that, please? Just Councillor O'Brien. Councillor Robinson.
Yeah, I would like to actually make a slight modification to A, in that it's we add the three words endorse for public exhibition, if the seconder will agree to that.
So Robinson, this is part B, is public exhibition for 28 days.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, well,
sorry, why are we needing a second wording in part A?
oh, it's just a modification of the word endorsement.
Sorry, I can't see any value there. We're going to endorse it. We're going to then put it on public exhibition. So that's what the four parts are. So, Councillor O'Brien.
Endorse means you agree with it, and endorsement for exhibition means that you're happy for it to go onto public exhibition. There's a slight difference of meaning. I can see the difference. You can't? Maybe you need to be an English teacher, I don't know.
Yes, maybe I do. I can't see it. But anyway, well, we can. It's not going to make any neither here nor there. So what was the wording you wanted, Councillor Robinson?
Already there.
Ah, all right. So, Councillor Gray, Brian, did you want to comment?
I don't know why you didn't get all the women mixed up today, Mr Mayor. We're all separate individuals. No, I agree with what Councillor Robinson has said. Oh, yeah, I'm happy to go with this, yep.
Speaker for the motion? Speaker
Can I
for?
move an amendment, please?
Yes, you can.
Yeah, I'd like to move an amendment on the thing, because I think us putting it down, I'd like to go to the 1.5 rather than the 1, because reason being it'll drive business away from town, and the other reason will be, as we're even told in our workshop, it will encourage people to put in fires illegally.
So, do I have a second for your amendment? Councillor, oh, God, sorry. Bailey. Could I
So before we go ahead, getting the wording required, this is it's in the bottom of the page. It's got the dot points. It's got a 1 gram. They wish to amend that to 1.5 grams per kilogram. Is that correct, Councillor Bailey? Gillespie?
Yes, that's correct.
So, Mr Mayor, if I can help, item A should read, appliances be endorsed for public exhibition with the change that, as you said. Okay.
Thank you. That might be a good clarification point.
Be endorsed for public exhibition with the change that, replacing 1.5 with 1, however you word that, I'm not a technical person. With the change that, with the change, which, yeah, we're changing part of the draft to go on exhibition.
Bear with us, councillors, while we get this wording up.
Do I get to speak to the original motion before the amendment?
As the original move, I think you still get the right to reply. No, you can speak to it. Spoken yet, you can speak. No, she hasn't spoken. He hasn't recognised her yet, but you'll have to.
So, Councillor Gillespie, that's satisfy your amendment?
Thank you, Mayor, that does.
Councillor Gillespie, you wish to speak for this amendment?
Yeah, as I said previously, I just think that it will, if we bring it in as under the standards or higher than the standards, whichever way you want to look at it, it will encourage people to buy out of town and bring their fires and install them in Armidale themselves, and which, as I said previously in one of our workshops, that it can be dangerous doing that, and if they can install their fires through our rules of our development applications, I think it will be a lot more appropriate. Thank you.
Important point. I'd just like to ask our acting CEO to ask for clarification on that, of installing heaters that come from out of town that do not meet the specification requirements.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll just pass to our officer, Mr Ambrose Hallman, to respond.
Thank you. In terms of people purchasing a heater outside of Armidale, the standard's actually enforced by the OEH, so the old Environmental Protection Authority. So they're the enforcement agency for ensuring that solar fuel heaters on the market comply with their standard. In terms of a person buying a heater in another town, bringing it into town, when they seek advice from council staff and seek application to install the solar fuel heater in accordance with the Local Government Act, they'll be told that they need to adhere to the standard we have in our local approvals policy. And that is only in the Armidale urban area. So council has traditionally, in this local approvals policy since back in about 2006, maintained a emission level below the Australian standard, or below the standard that EPA have. And in this case, what's actually happened is, because this policy and with the merger hasn't been reviewed in the last 2 or 3 years, the standard's actually caught up to where council was with our policy. So it's now an opportunity for us to then stretch it a little bit more by going to the 1 kilogram for emissions. In terms of heaters on the market at present, of the 500 odd so heaters out there, there's about 70% now currently comply with the standard we're proposing in the new policy. So for people that come and install a heater then that they've purchased outside our local government area and install it, they're installing it illegally without approval from council, and that's something that I wouldn't recommend members of the community actually do.
Thank you, Mr. Ambrose. So you've had a speak on it. Councillor Bailey, you wish to speak for it? Anyone else wish to speak for the amendment?
No, I guess.
Anyone wish to speak against? Councillor Witters?
Yep. I've just written 2 quick notes here. Why should we change our standards on the potential of people to break the law? We can't determine their own actions. We've got a certain standard that is set, and because where does that if we do it now, where does that precedent stop? Do we change everything because someone's old Johnny from the block can break the law whenever he chooses to? So we need to keep our standards set. We can't predict what other people are going to do, and as was stated by Mr. Holman, when these things are put in, they'll need council approval and everything else, and the standards can be changed from there. So I'm against the amendment based on those points.
Speaking for the amendment, Councillor Gray.
I think the amendment to go to the Australian standards of 1.5 first of all shows that the EPA has followed the lead that the council has previously had and is now sitting at, has set a benchmark, and the Australian standard has now reached that benchmark of 1.5. I think this is a happy medium for people getting used to and being educated on where we are as far as air quality, and to go below that may be cause contention that doesn't necessarily need to be there, but it also may be that there could be an incentive or incentivise for people that go below the 1.5 that may be able to be a happy medium between the 1 and the 1.5 being in the policy. So I'm for this amendment based on that this is the actual Australian standard coming in. Is it in 2019? Yep. Yep.
Anyone wish to speak against the motion? Councillor Robinson.
Well, I think words fail me as far as our economic development is concerned, and are making Armadale an attractive place to live. Already this year, we have failed to meet the Australian national air quality standards on 10 occasions, as measured by the New South Wales government's own data. And you tell me, can any of the councillors tell me any other place in New South Wales where we've got official measurements that's come even close to that, missing those standards? We're all saying we should meet the Australian standards set by the wood heating industry. I reinforce for wood heaters. They're not really set by the EPA, they're set by the wood heating industry, because the wood heating industry has a veto on changing those standards. And if they don't think it's profitable, then they can veto them. So, but the EPA and all state governments got together and set these national air quality standards. And we can't meet them. And if we can't meet them, then we are going to put people off coming here to live here. And I think that's a really important issue. But I would also like to say that the amendment or the policy itself, I would like, when we put it out, I mean, the whole point of this is to put it on public exhibition so the community can have its say. And I hope in the end, community interests, not the vested interests of the wood heating industry, will guide our policy. And if we can't clean up our air, then I hope this policy looks at alternative options. And one alternative option I've looked into is to try, and if we can't stop the wood smoke pollution coming into our houses, then we should all be using, or council could at least suggest using filtration system inside the houses to mitigate the damage. This has been done in Canada, where they've looked at healthy volunteers and they've measured taken blood samples and measured their blood vessel health, and found that if you actually have a filter inside your house, then you can actually get more flexible arteries, and you get a much better, reduce the risk of getting heart attacks and strokes. And remember that there's new research come out from Tasmania that shows that anything above 4 micrograms per cubic metre of wood smoke exposure seriously increases the risk of heart failure, which is one of the most common problems we have as far as hospital admission in Australia. And the other thing we can do, and this is another part of the policy we should be looking at, is encouraging people to exercise when and where the air is clean. In Tasmania, they have an aerator app that sends out warning whenever PM 2.5 exceeds 25 micrograms per cubic metre. And for example, last Sunday, between 5 and 6 PM, our New South Wales government station at the Creeklands classed our air as very poor, with PM 2.5 levels of 43 micrograms per cubic metre. The next hour it was 62, then 45, then 67. So we need a policy that's going to minimise the risks to the people who live here. If people want to exercise in the evening, why couldn't our policy encourage them to choose an area with clean air, such as the uni campus or other areas where there's no such smoke? And also, as part of our policy, and I think this is another important thing that we should be looking at, is that New South Wales Health calculated the massive economic costs of domestic wood heating in the Sydney metropolitan area. Why don't we look at an investigation using the same methods to estimate the economic cost of our air pollution? Maybe if we did that, then we'd have some economic ideas to guide us to find how much it's costing our people, our residents, how much it's costing us in discouraging people from live here. And that would
Councillor Robinson, I think your time's up.
Well, that would give our council help us develop a case of the funds needed to protect the health and welfare of our community.
Someone wish to speak for the motion? Apologies.
Could I now exercise my right to speak?
You don't have a right, sorry.
I was the seconder of the amendment.
Oh, sorry, yes.
And I'm Councillor Bailey, just in case you've forgotten. I would think that the 15 or 16 years that I've been working in economic development and regional development, I've never had anybody come to me and say they wouldn't move here because of the level of wood smoke. We had investors in town yesterday, and they believe we're one of the most advanced communities, and they're going to actually encourage their people to move here because they see us as probably one of the most advanced IT integrated cities in Australia. So they held no such reluctance, and they raved about Armidale as a place to be. So I don't believe that it is a significant reason. I too believe that 1.5 is a fair standard, and if we move it to 1, does that mean the following year we're going to move it down to 0.5 or down to 0.2? And by regulation we'll eventually close the whole industry down? I'm sorry, I don't think that's acceptable. I think 1.5 is a fair standard, and I think we should stick with it.
Anyone wish to speak against the amendment?
Yep.
Councillor
O'Brien.
O'Brien.
I do think it is, well, it's a disgrace to actually put, to not prioritise the environmental and safety aspect of this and put that below the wood smoke industry's demands. That's a disgrace. The safety and security of and the health of our community is more important, far more important. And the EPA will make our pollution public soon. Is that something that we want to see, our level of pollution will be made public, and we won't be the defenders, and we won't be the people trying to make solutions on this. Instead, we'll be defending an industry. I think it's time that councillors really started actually putting the safety, security and health of the community before the wood smoke industry. Thank you.
Anyone else to speak for the motion? Okay, the right of reply goes back to Councillor Robertson.
Thank you. Well, first of all, can I correct Councillor Bailey? We're talking about 1.5 in 2019. Not next year, not the year after, not the year after that, nor the year after that. And I think I would also like to point out that we've only had the official New South Wales government data on our air quality for less than a week, maybe 2 weeks. So maybe the people you saw hadn't actually seen them yet. But they will get out. And when they do get out, our name will not be as an attractive place to live or work, because there are so many health problems caused by breathing air pollution above the standard, and even at half the level of the standard. We should be a smart city, and we've all seen the relationship shown in Sweden between dementia and wood smoke pollution. Not at 25 micrograms per cubic metre, which is the standard we've been exceeding regularly. 4 times in the past 6 days we've exceeded that standard. Not at 25 micrograms per cubic metre, not at 10 micrograms per cubic metre, not at even 4 micrograms per metre. Those effects relating to dementia have been shown at 1 microgram per cubic metre. So this is a very serious issue. And while you can laugh at it, or some councillors think it's actually amusing to say that we aren't interested in the health of our community. I certainly know people who've moved out of Armadale because of air pollution, and a lot of other people do. So I think we should put our community first, put the health of our community first, and basically look at all the pros and cons of this, and look at the benefits and the cost of it. And another thing I'd like to clear up, a related issue confusing, which people seem to have been, which possibly has been happening because of vested interest, which was my question about 2 months ago, about not meeting national air quality standards and our high child mortality rates, which I suggested could be due to several factors, including disadvantage and poor housing, as well as pollution. We all know regional areas are disadvantaged when it comes to health services, exemplified by shorter life expectancy and the high proportions who delay seeking doctors or buying medications because of the cost. If we don't draw attention to these issues, what hope have we of finding solutions and the funds to fix them? So let's really look at this on a scientific basis. Look at the health costs, look at the benefits and the cost to our community. And I will stand by what I've said, that this is a real issue that we should be fixing, not papering over the cracks and pretending that it doesn't exist.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. I'll put that to the vote. This is the amendment that's been moved by Councillor Galletley and seconded by Councillor Bailey. The amendment which is on that part A. So that is to change the emission factor of not greater than 1.5 to. So those in favour of the amendment, raise your hands please. 6. Those against. The amendment holds. So the amendment becomes a motion. So now the motion, I think Councillor O'Brien, I don't think we actually gave you, I'm sorry, Councillor Robertson, I don't think I gave you a chance to have a say for the motion, but I think you've already given us an earful for it. So, and I'm not really sure whether we're up to...
Point of order. I'm sorry, I think an earful is a pejorative term, and I really would request you might rephrase that, Mr. Mayor.
My apologies.
Mr. Mayor, you should now put the amendment as the motion.
Well, that, yes. So the amendment... Do I need to move a second? Yeah, it becomes the motion. So, no, does anyone wish to speak against the motion as is? No, that was for the amendment. I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour of the motion, those against? Carried. Vote recorded.
Can I just clarify who seconded that motion, please? Further up. I think it was
Councillor O'Brien. Oops. 11.2, endorsement of the draft cattle grids policy for public exhibition. It's for part there. Can I have a mover?
Mr Mayor, I'd like to move that the matter be deferred for 1 month, and if I have a second, I'll explain why. Thank you. If I can speak to the deferral, last week at our workshop, the view was expressed by yourself and others that ideally we should be trying to get rid of 285 ramps on our roads in due course, and I think that our policy needs to address that. And I talked last week about provision of some incentives. That's not included in the draft policy before us today. I'm happy to sit down with the writer of this report and yourself and others that know a bit about cattle grids and flesh out those incentives and bring it back to council in a month's time.
So I've got a mover that and a seconder that we defer this to the July meeting. So I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Good. Unanimous. .3, which is the Guyra Main Street upgrade. Now, before I put that for a move and a second, I'd like to ask our acting CEO for an update on it, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. If I could just call upon Mr Rob Shaw, our council officer responsible for the upgrade. Rob, if you can take the microphone.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Last night, staff met with a focus group that we've established here in Guyra and discussed the process that we're going through with as we're about to start the Main Street project. We discussed this report and the options that we have to keep the project within our existing budget, and we got the endorsement of that focus group to proceed with the recommendation. So basically we're looking at keeping the project within the budget of $2.77 million by reducing the scope of the work from where it's shown on the drawings to the front of the post office, which, by the way, is where it was actually shown when we produced concept plans and put them out for public comment in the first place. So that was included in the final detailed drawings because the designer felt that traffic would be handled a lot better with a new roundabout there. But we can do it without that, and in future, if we decide that we do need to add a roundabout at Mackenzie Street, we can always do that in the future. So there's a significant saving in the cost as reported of around about $250,000. We're also looking at saving a significant amount on the final estimate for the project by looking at more cost-effective pavers. When we were looking at the options for pavers, we just happened to choose the dearest paver that we had on option. But there are other pavers that can do the job just as well, the same colour, the same texture, and we'll be looking at seeing what we can save in that area there. Significant opportunity there to save $70,000 or $80,000 on the project. So with our discussions there last night, we decided we would prefer not to cut out the street art that we're proposing. We've got a budget of about $20,000 to put street art in the street. I think that's a really good thing because it will allow the street to have some uniquely Guyra aspects to it when it's completed. The other issue we were looking at in saving was there's a potential to save some money on the standard of street lighting, but for a small additional cost, we would like to keep the street poles, the smart poles that are proposed by the designer, because they're very modern and give us the flexibility to do a lot of interesting things in the street with lighting. So basically, at the end of the day, the focus group endorsed the recommendation that you have in front of you, and they support it. And I'd commend the recommendation to you.
Thank you very much. Just before you go, any questions from the councillors?
The smart poles includes the LED lights as well?
Yes, they do.
Any others? Councillor O'Connor? Oh, yes.
Oh, I'd just like to thank Rob. Sorry, Mr. Shaw. I think we've all got it today. I'd like to thank Mr. Shaw for for retaining the street art as chair of the Arts and Culture and Heritage Committee. It's very important, and I'd like to let everybody know that there's some very, very exciting street art in the pipeline, and I think you'll all love it. So thank you.
Councillor Gray? Oh. Thanks very much, Rob. Appreciate it. Okay, can I have a mover and a seconder for that? Councillor Gray, Councillor Robinson, Councillor Gray.
I would like to commend the focus group on their recommendation. I believe that this is the best option, option one, to reduce the scope rather than taking any funds out of the much needed roads. So, well done.
Councillor Robinson?
Yes, I agree. It's a very good compromise and I think it will work well.
Anyone wish to speak for the motion? Against the motion? So I'll put the motion as is. Those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you. Um, 11.4, which is in your late things, it's the Smart City grant funding opportunity that you have in there. So could I have a mover, please? Councillor O'Connor, Councillor Gray. Councillor O'Connor?
Oh, look, I'd just like to recommend this for endorsement by council. I think we've had a workshop presentation on it. This is going to be an amazing, if we are successful in this application, this will be an amazing thing, largely for our IT department, because it will install a new IT platform which will be useful as council moves into the Internet of Things. The other thing that this project will do is answer the request that councillors have had on the books, if you like, for some time, which is a lot more data about our air quality, where we have problems, where we don't. I think, notwithstanding that we have some broad differences about how serious the problem is, we are aware that if we can find out objective information about where the problems are coming from and target areas that need alternatives offered to them in respect of managing emissions, that's a great thing. But the other great thing about this is that we really need help from the state government. There's a group of us went with the former CEO, Mr. Peter Dennis, down to not only UTS, who's hoping to partner with us in this, but we also met with officers in the EPA and let them know that we're very concerned about getting support for addressing the air quality issues in Armidale. The one thing that will really help us in extracting funding from the state government to assist us, as I might add, they're assisting many metropolitan areas and some other regional areas is a study like this, because it will provide really detailed evidence of where our problems are and the kind of incentives, the kind of financial assistance that we need to address it. So I really encourage all councillors to get behind this, because not only is it going to deal with a problem that is a problem for us with respect to air quality, but it's going to open us into a whole brave new world in terms of IT and the Internet of Things. I really support this project. Thanks.
Councillor Gray, would you like to speak for it? No, Councillor Tiley. Councillor Gray, she's a seconder.
I was trying to strengthen the motion with the mover of with the approval of the mover and seconder. Would you like to listen to that? I suggest that we add the words, just to show our real commitment to this proposal, after the word grants, and commit to its matching contribution as indicated in this report under financial considerations. This is not another application. We're matching it, and the financial considerations tell us how we're matching it. Okay? Okay, thank you. So I think the mover and seconder support it, so it's commit to its matching contribution as indicated in this report under financial considerations. Let's keep everything crossed.
I'd need to, Councillor O'Connor and Councillor Gray, you happy with that?
Can I just make a comment that as a procedural fairness, that if councillors would like to make an amendment, would they at least allow the mover and seconder to at least speak, because they might already have an amendment already on there, and it's just fairness to then maybe give the mover, if you want to move something, be a mover or a seconder.
This is called sweetness and light and cooperation.
So, Councillor Gray.
Firstly, respecting your comments there, Councillor Witters, I indicated that I was actually okay with that amendment for him voicing that. So I believe this Smart City grant is smart. It's great. It's fantastic. It's inclusive. It broadens the conversation, particularly around air quality. It broadens the conversation to, I think, be more inclusive of the community, so that there will be far more readiness to accept and move forward in improving our air quality with having a relationship like this with UTS as well. So I commend the people that have put this application together. You've done a great job, so thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak for the motion? Councillor Bailey.
Could I ask a question, please? Do we have money in the budget to provide the matching funds if we get the grant?
Councillor, Mr. Acting CEO.
My understanding is yes, Councillor Bailey.
Councillor Witters.
Another question. I think at the last meeting or the meeting before, I questioned money in the budget in regard to something else, and my question was basically palmed off. So if we can find money for something, we can for that was requested at the time. I'm sure we can find money for something else.
Just a bit of information to you. The University of New England is very keen to be involved in this, so that's just another angle to it. So, can I have anyone wish to speak against the motion? Okay, I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. Now, moving on to item 12.1, public. This is the mayoral portraits of the former Jimeric, Armidale City and Armidale Jimeric Council mayors be preserved and managed by the Armidale Folk Museum. So can I have a mover for that, Councillor?
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to move what is a compromise, and I'll read it. The first part is very similar to the recommendation that the mayoral portraits of the former Jimeric Shire and Armidale City Council be preserved and managed by the Armidale Folk Museum. That's the former Armidale City, former Armidale Jimeric. That's part one. And part two is that mayoral portraits from the date of the merger to form the Armidale Jimeric Council onwards be placed in the alcove in the Armidale Regional Council chambers, for which purpose it was constructed. And I can explain.
Would we need clarification on that as the number of mayors' portraits increases, that there's a cycling?
Yes.
Should that be included?
If I get a second, I can explain about the alcove and why it was built, etc. Thank you. When, as administrator, I had the portraits taken down from the foyer, it was always intended that the more recent ones would re-emerge in the Armidale Council chambers. Andrew Strudwick filled in the veranda where councillors used to smoke, moved an inside wall to the outside, and you'll notice in there behind where the staff sit, there's two big walls, and there's plenty of room there for now, from the year 2000 onwards, and for many years to come. And I think that's appropriate place, and that's why the money was spent to build that. That the mayoral portraits of the former Jimeric Shire and Armidale City Council and Armidale City Councils, and then take out the next bit and take out, keep going, be preserved. Okay, so now woo, go up to the word be, take out mayors. Right, now you got part one. So everything before the year 2000 goes to the Folk Museum, and that mayoral portraits from the date of the merger of Jimeric Shire and Armidale City, that mayoral portraits from the commencement of the Armidale Jimeric Council, mayoral portraits from the commencement of the Armidale Jimeric Council and onwards, that means that includes Armidale Regional Council, and onwards be placed in the alcove in the council chambers, Armidale. The alcove in the council chambers, Armidale, and that's directly behind where Councillor Bailey, Councillor Gallatley sit. Two white walls, so you'll have people looking over your shoulders at all times, including former Mayor Bayersdorf. I don't want that to disturb you. Are you happy with that?
So, Councillor Tyler,
I think we're in furious agreement, Mr. Mayor.
I see that. Your microphone, please, Councillor Tyler. Councillor O'Brien.
No, that looks good. Yep. No, yes.
Some decorum, please, councillors. Anyone wish to speak for it? Anyone wish to speak against what you see up there? Otherwise, I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? Unanimous. Carried. Thank you. Item 13.1, you'll notice this is, the recommendation is up there, but we've had a few issues with getting the information for this report, and I would like this matter to be deferred to the July ordinary meeting for consideration. If I can have a mover and a seconder, so Councillor Robertson, Councillor Martin. Oh, sorry, not Councillor Robertson, O'Connor. I have problems with names too. So that's just a procedural motion. So I've had, so I won't even ask for point against. Just votes. Those for the motion, carried. (13.2). This is the report on the acceptance of tenders. Can I have a mover and a seconder for that, please? Councillor Gillespie, Councillor O'Brien. Councillor Gillespie?
No, this is not it. I didn't do a seconder. I was going to ask for an amendment. Sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's all right.
So I'll have it. I'll just wait to finish off. Who's the second? Someone second it? Councillor Gray? Yeah. So Councillor Gillespie?
Yeah, thumbs up. I'm happy with the whole thing. Thank you.
Councillor Gray?
Just a question, Mr. Mayor, to the governance people. Would the words added to the end and the delegation be endorsed? Is that necessary? Not? I mean, it's a continuation of a previous delegation, is that correct?
To respond to Councillor Tiley's question, the resolution adopted by the council at the extraordinary meeting when considering the appointment of the new CEO included dot point D from recollection, which was endorsing the existing delegations for the new CEO, which includes that tender.
Good. Councillor Gray, you've got a...
I was
right.
seconder.
Seconder,
so
yes.
I'm quite happy to hear the amendment.
I was hoping that we would also add in that it would be reviewed in 6 months. The reason why is I've done a survey of 21 councils, and most of them, or in fact all of the regional ones, usually have the limit is the upper limit is upper limit, is around 150,000 to 250,000. The only one I could find with 500,000 was Sydney. I realise this has gone through already, but I wondered if first we might look at in say 6 months or so how it's going, but also what safeguards are put in place with such a high limit. I know that Sydney does weekly reports to councils for all the tenders that have been approved.
Councillor O'Brien, just before you go ahead, for amendment, before you're speaking.
Oh, I see. I
for
can't
we
talk
need
yet.
We need a seconder for your amendment.
Okay, gotcha. A review in 6 months for reasons you've already.
So
a little bit
someone
off.
to second Councillor O'Connor. So now you can talk.
Yeah, sorry about that. I thought there was some important, so I did a little bit of research on this issue and thought that it was important to have a few little safeguards in place. Not that we can do this now, but maybe review it in about 6 months. One aspect of procurement obviously is efficiency, and that's a fantastic thing for efficiency, and I agree with it. But we also should make sure that we've put in place things that minimise risk and ensure transparency and accountability, and ensuring there's proper competitive process. And there's some really terrific suggestions about how we could safeguard it, including making it available to councillors, mapping how your procurement process is mapped and how it's done. So while of course there's no possibility there'll be any, I'm sure any problems with you doing this, I think it would be a safeguard for council in the future just to review it in 6 months and see what safeguards we can put in place to ensure that council and the community is kept up to date and informed about the tenders coming in. That's all.
So just to clarify, you want this reviewed rather than just a report provided to council?
Do either, but I thought it might be just a little bit hard now to make that decision, so it might be easier just to review it in 6 months, and in which time we have time to discuss it and decide what kind of safeguards we're going to have in, what sort of reporting procedures. Perhaps you have plans for reporting procedures to come to us regularly about what kind of tenders are happening and more detailed in the quarterly reports and some safeguards in place. I don't know. I don't know whether it's too much to ask that now, or we just review it in 6 months and see if we have all those processes in place.
Let me just defer that to our expertise here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a little bit of background. In 2016 legislative reforms, the Section 377 was amended, and it basically gives the delegation to the CEO to consider all tenders, except for those where it impacts on staffing resources. So what Armidale Regional Council has done is, rather than giving a full carte blanche delegation to the CEO to consider all tenders, we have put a restriction on that delegation of $500,000. And as we've been able to demonstrate, that level of $500,000 is basically relevant to operational type tenders. Any significant tenders are always required then to come to council for a decision. Also, in regards to our procurement, we have very prescriptive procurement practices that we're required to follow, and also as part of our delegation to the CEO, the executive leadership team considers and ticks off those tenders that are being considered within the CEO's delegations. So that, to me, I consider that the council has sufficient standards in place and also reflective of the delegation. The other thing is that delegations under the Act are required to be reviewed 12 months of a new council. So there is also always a mechanism in place where that review is required. And just to clarify, if the council was of a mind that they wanted to review the delegations, that is a resolution of the council is required to either endorse the existing delegations to the CEO or amend them accordingly.
Councillor O'Connor?
I just put one more question to Mr. Wilson. Sorry, I was just struggling with the mixture again. You said significant tenders are brought to council for decision, but what's the definition of significant?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, as outlined in my previous reports, the quarterly reports to council, there has been mention made of what is significant tenders, and the examples are airport, waste management, Malpas, dam. Yeah, so you can see that any tender that is of any significant, or any project that is of significance that requires tenders, they will always be presented, need to come to the council for a decision, purely because of the quantum of the contract.
Councillor Tiley?
Mr. Mayor, are we to debate yet? Are we into debate yet?
Yes, we are.
I'd like to speak in favour of Part A, but not Part B. And the reasons are, first of all that Mr. Wilson's just said. When I was in the administrator chair, I had the option to allow that delegation to $1 million. And I did some research too, Councillor O'Brien, and checked with other councils of our size as to what was a reasonable amount. And Wagga and Dubbo and Company were talking about 500,000, which they subsequently adopted. Given all the checks and balances that we have in terms of our governance, in terms of our procurement rules, I think the 500,000 is adequate. And as Mr. Wilson said, reports come back to council on a regular basis. It's also in the annual report, tenders that are accepted. So there's plenty of checks and balances, and I don't think that the council needs to be going to the path of Part B.
Just to clarify, this is the amendment we're debating now, which is part B. Councillor Gray?
I just had a question regarding the regularity of the reports. Is it quarterly, these ones? Thank you.
Anyone wish to speak for or against the amendment? So I'll put the amendment, which is the part B.
Press my thing to speak.
You wish to speak against?
No, for it. I'm the seconder of the amendment. So I think...
I thought you spoke before, sorry. Councillor Connor?
Look, the reason I'm supporting this is not because I want to reduce the delegation, but I think that the whole area of tendering and procurement is a difficult area, and it's something that I believe this governing body, this council, would do well to know a little more about. And I'm not suggesting that when that review came, we would change it, but I think what we need to do is to put in some mechanism, and maybe we can amend this slightly, so that we as councillors understand our role in relation to that delegation. And I think that what Mr Wilson has said is that, yes, matters over $500,000 do come to us, fine, but this is not really about that issue. The issue here is that councillors, as the governing body, have perhaps more than a quarterly briefing, maybe just emails, but some kind of list that shows us, or I'm not even proposing that we do this, but that actually we do some investigation into whether this could be done as it is in other councils that have a large delegation like this. I'm informed that in fact Dubbo and Wagga have not gone to a $500,000 delegation, and I don't. There's no disparagement meant towards what Councillor Tiley said, but it's a big jump for a regional council to go from 150 to 500 to $500,000, and so I think it's responsible of us to ask for some kind of review process where we can look at the whole picture within the next 6 months, and I do think that would give the new CEO, who's starting on the 23rd of next month, time to settle in.
Now, just to, I've been corrected, this is a addition to the motion, so the amendment, if we fail this one, it goes back to the original motion. So this is, we're debating on whether this parts A and B rather than just part B. So Councillor Gray?
I wish to speak against the amendment as that motion is there. I understand and agree with the concerns of Councillor O'Brien and Councillor O'Connor. I think with this, now that we understand that we get quarterly reports of this information, it's even better because we can review the situation without having a 6-monthly review. We are, for all intents and purposes, having a quarterly review. And so at any point, as was explained to us, that we as councillors can put up a motion to review at any time, am I correct, on the delegations. So I think the fact that we get quarterly reports on this is more than sufficient. It's actually more than what the amendment is asking.
So Councillor O'Brien and Councillor Connor moved this amendment. Do we have any more discussion? Otherwise, I'll go back to Councillor Gletley. You have the right to reply.
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Okay, I'll put the motion, the amendment as it's up there on the board. Those in favour? Those against? The amendment is lost. So I'll put then that we're back to part A. I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Carried. We're moving along. Item 13.3, which is the cash and investment report. Could I have a mover, Councillor Morat? A seconder, Councillor Witters. Councillor Morat?
No, thanks. Everything's...
Councillor Witters?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Right, I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Item 16.1, which is just a note, the minutes of the Audit and Risk Committee. Can I move it, please? Councillor Gray, Councillor Murat. Any comments, Councillor Gray? I'll put that vote then. Those for, those against, carried. Similarly, we have item 16.2, which is the Arts and Culture and Heritage Advisory Committee. Just a noting. Councillor O'Connor, Councillor Murat. Councillor O'Connor, any comments?
Actually, I will say something. If anybody here has an idea of a new festival to do with the arts and culture, please let me know, because that's one of the things that the committee is actually working on as a sort of separate, discrete project. Yeah, sorry. I'll speak more slowly and loudly. Might even stand. Excuse me. Our committee's having a bit of fun at the moment, because we've had an application from a former mayor and or an indication of interest from an former mayor, and another prominent member of the community to come up with a new arts festival. So if any of the councillors here or staff or anybody at all has ideas for a new cultural festival for Armidale, do get in touch with me. Thank you.
Okay, frivolity aside, can I put that to the vote then, please? Those in favour? Carried. The last one is 16.3, which is the Traffic Advisory Committee. Councillor Martin, Councillor Murat. Councillor Martin, any comments? Okay, I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Now, could I have a mover that we... If I may, is it too late for me to ask a question of the President of the Traffic Committee? It is a bit, because we've voted on that. I'm just about to ask that we have a move in a second to go into a recess for 20 minutes. So, Councillor Gray, Councillor Martin, we will come back in 20 minutes, please.